The Empire had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. They were hunters. It was not just what they did, it was what they were. Their entire civilization was built on one simple truth: the strong hunt the weak. They had conquered 17 star systems. They had destroyed species too many to count, and they had never, not once, met anything that could stop them. They stood 8 feet tall. They had 4 arms, each ending in claws that could tear through metal. Their skin was thick and dark, like armor made of flesh. They had 3 hearts beating in their massive chests, and their eyes could see in total darkness. Evolution had made them perfect killers. History had made them proud. When their scout ships found Earth, they thought they had discovered paradise. The small blue planet floated in an unremarkable corner of the galaxy. It was covered in water and green land, and it was filled with billions of soft, pink creatures called humans. The scouts watched from orbit for 3 days. They studied these humans. They saw that they had no claws, no fangs, no armor. They were slow. They were weak. They built tall buildings and lived packed together in huge cities like animals waiting to be collected. The scouts sent their report to the Emperor with great excitement. New prey had been found. The great hunt would begin. Was the captain of the colony transport ship called Horizon's Edge. She was 34 years old, with short black hair and steady hands that never shook, even in crisis. Her ship carried 3,000 passengers in deep sleep, all of them dreaming of a new home on a distant planet called 442b. It was supposed to be a simple journey. Wake the colonists, land on the new world, start a new life. Had made this trip twice before. She would never make it again. The attack came without warning. One moment the stars were quiet. The next moment 3 interceptor ships appeared out of nowhere. They were black and sharp, shaped like the claws of some giant beast. Before it could even call for help, they opened fire. The first shot tore through the engine room. The second destroyed the communication array. The third punched a hole in the passenger deck where 3,000 innocent people slept in their pods. Watched her ship die around her. Alarms screamed, fires burned, and then they came aboard. She hid in a maintenance tunnel and watched through a vent as the aliens walked through her ship. They were huge, bigger than anything she had ever seen. They moved with the easy confidence of creatures who had never known fear, and they were laughing, actually laughing, as they pulled screaming passengers from their sleep pods and dragged them away. They did not want to kill the humans quickly. That would be no fun. They wanted to hunt them. They wanted to chase them. They wanted to feel the thrill of the capture, so they took them alive, loading them into their ships like cargo. Could do nothing. She had no weapons that could hurt these monsters. She had no way to call for help. All she could do was hide and watch and remember every single face that was taken. And 12 people survived, 12 out of 3,000. Lieutenant was one of them. He was a combat engineer, a man who knew how to build things and break things in equal measure. Half his face was covered in burn scars from the attack, fresh wounds that would never fully heal. But his eyes were clear and hard, already calculating, already planning. Doctor was another survivor. She was a scientist who had spent her whole life studying alien life. She had dreamed of first contact since she was a little girl. She had imagined meeting strange and wonderful beings from distant stars. She had never imagined this. The 12 survivors escaped in a damaged shuttle. They drifted away from the burning wreck of Horizon's Edge and watched as the ships jumped away, carrying their friends and families to some unknown horror. For a long time, no one spoke. What was there to say? Then the shuttle's broken radio crackled to life. A signal was coming through, broadcast on all frequencies, meant for anyone who could hear it. The voice spoke in a language they did not understand, but the shuttle's computer translated it automatically. "We have found new prey," the voice said. It was a commander announcing his victory to the galaxy. "The humans, they are slow, they are weak, they taste of fear. The great hunt has begun. All clans are invited to join. There is enough prey for everyone." His hands were shaking, his jaw was clenched so tight it looked like it might break, and sat very still, listening to every word. Back on Earth, the same message arrived 6 hours later. Governments around the world received it at the same time. At first, they did not believe it. Aliens, hunters, it sounded like a bad movie. But then the ships appeared in the sky and the hunting began. They started with the biggest cities: Seoul, Tokyo, Mumbai, New York. They dropped from the sky in small hunting parties, usually 5 or 6 at a time. They did not use bombs or massive weapons. That would be too easy. They came down with just their claws and their speed and their hunger for sport. People ran, people screamed, people died. The armies of Earth tried to fight back. They sent soldiers and tanks and planes. Some of them fell. Their armor-like skin was tough but not impossible to break. A tank shell could kill one. 100 bullets could bring one down, but for every that died, 10 more came, and they learned quickly. They learned where the humans were strong and where they were weak. They learned to avoid the military and hunt the civilians instead. In the first week, 5 million people vanished, taken, hunted, gone. And her 11 survivors hid in an asteroid belt far from Earth. They had no weapons, no food, no hope. They listened to the radio transmissions from home and heard the world falling apart. Worked day and night to repair their shuttle. Studied the transmissions, trying to learn anything she could about their enemy, and sat alone in the pilot's seat, staring at the stars. She thought about the 3,000 people she had failed to save. She thought about the laughing hunters. She thought about the billions of people back on Earth who were being hunted like animals. And something changed inside her. She was not a soldier, she was just a ship captain, but she made a promise that night, alone in the dark between the stars. She promised that she would not die hiding. She would not let humanity go quietly into extinction. She would find a way to fight back. The thought they had found easy prey. They thought humans were just soft little creatures waiting to be hunted. They had no idea what they had started. Looked at her reflection in the cockpit window. Her eyes were red from crying. Her hands were still shaking, but her voice was steady when she finally spoke. "They think we are prey," she said quietly. "They have no idea what they have awakened." And somewhere in the vast darkness of space, the hunt continued, but the prey was beginning to change. The prey was beginning to remember that long ago, on a small blue planet, humans had been hunters too. They had just forgotten for a while. They were about to remember. 1 month after the Great Hunt began, the High Command created a report about humanity. They studied videos, examined captured humans, and talked to their hunters who had walked on Earth. The report was short and confident. Humans lived for about 80 years, which was very short. They had no natural weapons like claws or fangs. They could not run fast. They were not strong. They could not see in the dark. They could not survive in cold or heat for very long. Their skin was thin and soft. One good slash from a claw could kill them easily. The report ended with a simple conclusion: threat level 0. These creatures were perfect prey. The hunt would be easy and fun. They did not understand their mistake. They looked at human bodies and saw weakness. They never thought to look at human minds. Admiral Menu had been retired for 5 years when the invasion began. He was 62 years old, with gray hair and a bad knee from an old injury. He had served in the Navy for 30 years and had been looking forward to a quiet life. He had a small house near the sea and a garden where he grew vegetables. They destroyed his house on the 3rd day of the invasion. Now Minu sat in a bunker deep under the city of. The bunker had been built during the old wars when humans had fought each other. No one had used it for decades. Now it was full of soldiers, scientists, and government officials from around the world. They had come together because they had no other choice. Menu looked at the faces around him. He saw fear. He saw confusion. He saw people who did not know what to do. "We need a plan," he said simply. A young officer spoke up. "We have been fighting them. Our weapons can kill them, but there are so many and they keep coming." "Then we need to be smarter," Minu replied. "We cannot beat them with strength. We must beat them with our minds." He turned to a screen showing a map of the world. Red dots marked hunting grounds. There were hundreds of them now, spread across every continent. "We need to learn everything about them," Minu continued. "How they think, how they fight, what they fear. Every piece of information could save lives. From today, we are not just fighting, we are studying." Far away in space, and her small group of survivors were doing exactly that. Their shuttle had found a crashed hunter ship floating in the asteroid belt. The ship had been damaged in some accident, and its crew was dead. It was the first piece of luck the survivors had found. Spent 3 days taking the ship apart. He studied every wire, every weapon, every piece of technology. They were advanced, but their technology was surprisingly simple in some ways. "They have been the top hunters for so long," explained to the others. "They never needed to improve. Why change what already works?" Studied the dead bodies. She cut them open and examined them carefully. She learned how their 3 hearts worked. She found that their eyes, so good in darkness, were sensitive to bright light. She discovered that they had poor hearing compared to humans. "They hunt by sight and smell," reported. "They cannot hear soft sounds very well, and they think in straight lines. When they chase prey, they expect the prey to run in a straight line too. They get confused by sudden changes in direction." This information was small, but it was important. Every weakness was a weapon. Back on Earth, a man named was about to prove this point. Had been a Special Forces soldier before the invasion. He was 30 years old, lean and quiet, with eyes that never seemed to rest. He had been trained to survive in any situation. He had been trained to kill. When they came to his city, did not run. He watched them. He followed them through the streets, always staying hidden. He learned how they moved, how they hunted, how they communicated with each other. They always attacked from high places. They liked to look down on their prey. They liked to jump from rooftops and trees. It made the hunt more exciting. I decided to use this against them. He gathered 12 other survivors, all of them soldiers or police officers, or just ordinary people who refused to give up. He led them to a forest outside the city where a hunting party was known to operate. "They will come from above," told his team, "so we go below." They dug holes in the ground and covered them with leaves and branches. They hid in these holes for 16 hours, not moving, barely breathing. Humans could be patient in ways they never expected. When the hunting party arrived, there were 12. They moved through the forest with confidence, looking up at the trees, sniffing the air. They could smell humans nearby, but they could not find them. They did not think to look down. Prey never hid underground. Prey always ran or climbed. That was the natural order of things. The attack came from below. This team exploded out of their hiding holes. They had guns, knives, and homemade explosives. They were surprised, confused, caught completely off guard. The fight was brutal and bloody. When it was over, all 12 were dead, had lost 4 of his people, but they had won. He stood over the bodies of the fallen hunters and felt something strange. It was not just victory, it was a message. Before he left, carved words into a tree. He used a translator device taken from a dead to write the message in their language. "Now you are the prey." He also took trophies. He cut off the claws of the fallen and hung them from his belt. It was a message that the enemy would understand. When the commander found the scene, he could not believe what he was seeing. 12 of his best hunters dead, killed by prey, and the prey had taken trophies just like hunters did. For the first time in his life, the commander felt something he did not recognize. It took him a while to understand what it was. Oh, it was fear. News of victory spread quickly through the human resistance. It was a small battle, just 12 enemies killed, but it proved something important. They could die, they could be outsmarted, they could be beaten. Heard about the battle through intercepted transmissions. She smiled for the first time since the invasion began. "I understand now," she said too. "I understand the mistake they made." "What mistake?" asked. "They think hunting and war are the same thing," explained. "To them there is no difference. They chase prey, they kill prey, they win. Simple, but humans know the difference. We have fought real wars. We have developed strategies and tactics over thousands of years. We know how to plan, how to sacrifice, how to work together against a stronger enemy." She pulled up data on her screen, showing battle patterns. "They have never had to fight a real war," continued. "Every species they met either ran away or surrendered. They have no experience with an enemy that studies them, that adapts, that holds grudges." Looked up from his work on the salvaged technology. Grudges. "Yes," said, "humans never forget when someone hurts them. We remember pain. We remember insults. We remember every wrong done to us. And we wait, sometimes for years, sometimes for generations, until we can strike back." As she looked out the window at the stars. "They have started a war they do not understand. They think they are hunting animals, but they are actually making enemies, and humans are very, very good at being enemies." Nodded slowly. She thought about the 3,000 people she had lost. She thought about the millions dying on Earth. She felt the anger burning in her chest, cold and patient and endless. "Then let us show them," she said. "Let us show them what happens when you make enemies of humans." The others agreed. They had a crashed ship to repair, weapons to build, and a war to plan. They were only 12 people against an empire that had never been defeated. But they were humans, and humans never stopped fighting. They had started a hunt. They were about to discover that they had started something much worse. They had awakened the wolves. 2 years had passed since the great hunt began. The Empire was starting to notice something strange. Their hunters were disappearing. At first, the High Command blamed accidents. Earth was an unfamiliar world with dangerous animals and strange weather. Hunters got lost. Hunters made mistakes. These things happened. But the numbers did not lie. In the first year of the hunt, they had lost 300 hunters. That was acceptable. In the second year, they lost 2,000. That was not acceptable. Hunting parties would land in certain areas and simply vanish. No distress signals, no calls for help, just silence. When search teams went to find them, they found only bodies and burned ships and messages carved in script. We remember. Now you know fear. The hunt continues. The messages were always short and always terrifying. The commander led the Ghost Corps, the most feared human resistance group on Earth. She was 28 years old, small and thin, with a face that could look innocent and sweet until you saw her eyes. Her eyes were old. Her eyes had seen too much death. Before the invasion, had been a school teacher. She had taught history to children. She had been gentle and patient and kind. They had killed every single one of her students during a hunting raid. They had laughed while doing it. Now taught different lessons. She taught humans how to kill aliens. She taught them how to hide, how to ambush, how to turn the hunters into the hunted. Her Ghost Corps operated in the ruins of Seoul. The great city had been destroyed in the early days of the invasion, but its underground tunnels and subway systems still existed, had turned these tunnels into a fortress. Thousands of human fighters lived down there, emerging only to strike at hunting parties. The aliens had learned to fear certain areas. They called these places dead zones. Hunters who entered dead zones did not come back. They made a critical mistake. They broadcast their hunting schedules openly across their communication networks. They never imagined that prey might be listening, learning, planning. Listened to every broadcast. She mapped every hunting pattern. She knew when they would come and where they would land and how many hunters they would bring. When the fleet announced a major hunt at the Han River, knew it was time for a big statement. 50 ships, 1,000 hunters. They were coming to clean out the dead zone once and for all. Smiled when she heard the news. She had been preparing for this moment for 6 months. The preparation had been intense. Every building near the river was rigged with explosives. Every street had hidden traps. Snipers were positioned in places that would never think to look. Underground tunnels connected everything, allowing human fighters to move invisibly. Most importantly, had studied how thought. They always landed in open areas. They always spread out in the same patterns. They always expected prey to run. The fleet arrived at dawn. 50 black ships descended through the clouds, magnificent and terrible. 1,000 hunters jumped down, landing in the ruins of the city. They roared their battle cries and began to spread out, searching for prey. They found something else. The first explosions hit the outer groups, cutting them off from retreat. Then the snipers opened fire. targeting the officers and communications specialists. They tried to form defensive groups, but more explosions separated them. Then the humans came out of the ground. They emerged from sewers, from subway tunnels, from basements and hidden shelters. They attacked from every direction at once. They were used to chasing scattered prey. They had no idea how to fight an organized army. Led her fighters personally. She moved through the chaos like a ghost, appearing and disappearing, always where the enemy least expected her. She had a rifle in her hands and a knife on her belt, and absolutely no mercy in her heart. The battle lasted 12 hours. When it was over, 700 hunters lay dead. The rest had retreated to their ships and fled. It was the first time in the history of the great hunt that the prey had forced the hunters to run away. Stood in the middle of the battlefield, covered in blood and dirt and exhausted beyond words. Around her, human fighters were cheering, crying, holding each other. They had won. Against impossible odds, they had won. Far above Earth watched the battle through intercepted video feeds. Her small group had grown. Over 2 years, they had rescued survivors from other attacked ships, gathered resources, repaired their vessel. They now commanded a small fleet of 12 ships, crewed by humans who had lost everything and were ready to fight for revenge. Lieutenant had become her chief engineer. He had spent 2 years studying technology, and he had done more than learn it. He had improved it. Their weapons are powerful, reported, but they are also old. They have not changed their designs in centuries. They never needed to, but I have found ways to make them better, faster, stronger. He showed a modified cannon. It looked almost the same as the original, but its power output was 3 times higher. They stopped evolving, said, "We never do." This fleet made its first attack on a supply convoy 3 months after the Battle of the Han River. The convoy was carrying food and weapons to hunting fleets across the sector. It was protected by 6 warships, which should have been enough to destroy any threat. The battle was short and brutal. Ships attacked from multiple directions, using tactics that confused and divided the enemy. Human pilots flew with desperate courage, willing to sacrifice their own ships to destroy the enemy. They fought for glory and trophies. The humans fought for survival. The convoy was destroyed completely. Not a single ship escaped. News of the battle spread across the galaxy through communication networks. The hunters tried to hide their defeat, but word got out anyway. For the first time, other species heard that humans were fighting back and winning. They were a race of small, clever beings who had been conquered by the 5,000 years ago. They had served as slaves ever since, building ships and weapons for their masters. When they heard about human victories, something stirred in their hearts, something that had been dead for 5,000 years. The hope. There were ancient beings of light and energy, nearly immortal but physically weak. They had hunted them for sport for centuries, taking pleasure in how long they took to die. When the elders heard about the Battle of the Han River, they began to whisper among themselves. Perhaps they could be stopped. Perhaps the galaxy could be free. The hollow folk were creatures from a dark world, strange and silent. They had nearly wiped them out, keeping only a few alive in zoos for entertainment. When the survivors heard about humans, they began to plan. If the prey could become hunters, anything was possible. did not know it yet, but her small victories were changing the entire galaxy. Species that had been afraid for thousands of years were starting to wonder if they had been wrong. If they could bleed, maybe they could die. If humans could fight back, maybe others could too. Received a strange message through an encrypted channel. It came from a slave working on a warship. The message contained detailed information about fleet movements, weaknesses in their ships, codes that could be used to confuse their communications. The slave asked only one thing in return: do not stop fighting. You are giving the galaxy something it has not had in 10,000 years. You are giving us hope. Shared the message with Admiral Menu in the bunker under. The old admiral read it 3 times, then sat in silence for a long moment. We started this fight to survive, he finally said, but it seems we have started something bigger. We have started a revolution. He looked at the map of territory, hundreds of conquered worlds, billions of enslaved beings. If we can free them, Menu continued, if we can unite them, we can do more than survive. We can win. It was a bold idea. Humans were still fighting for their lives on Earth. Their fleet in space was tiny compared to the Armada. They were weak and few and damaged. But they had something they did not have. They had the ability to make friends. They had the ability to inspire. They had the ability to turn victims into warriors. The wolves were awake, and they were starting to gather a pack. The emperor sat on his throne of bones and listened to reports that made his 3 hearts burn with rage. 3 years of hunting humanity. 3 years that should have been simple sport. Instead, his empire was blighting. The numbers were impossible. They had lost more warriors fighting humans than they had lost in the entire previous century of conquest. Hunting parties disappeared. Supply convoys were destroyed. Entire fleets were ambushed and broken. Worse, the humans were not just defending anymore. They were attacking. General had been a tank commander before the invasion. He was 45 years old, built like a rock, with a voice that could be heard across a battlefield without any electronic help. He had lost his wife and 2 sons in the first week of the Great Hunt. He had spent 3 years turning his grief into something useful. Led the first human offensive against a held world. The planet was called Trophy World by the hunters. It was a place where they kept captured beings from dozens of species, keeping them alive for sport. Thousands of prisoners lived there in cages, waiting to be hunted for entertainment. The human fleet arrived without warning. They had learned to mask their ships from sensors, another gift from endless tinkering. By the time the garrison realized they were under attack, human soldiers were already landing. Led the ground assault personally. His forces hit the prison compounds first, freeing the captives. Most were weak and starving, broken by years of captivity, but some still had fire in their eyes. We came to set you free, told them through a translator device, but we could use your help. Will you fight? An elder stepped forward. He was small and old, barely reaching waist, but his voice was strong. We have been slaves for 5,000 years, the elder said. We have forgotten how to fight, but we have not forgotten how to hate. Teach us, and we will learn. Smiled, it was not a pleasant smile. Hate is a good start, he said. Now let me show you what to do with it. The uprising on Trophy World spread to 7 other planets within a month. Humans provided weapons, training, and leadership. The freed prisoners provided numbers, local knowledge, and thousands of years of stored rage. They found themselves fighting on multiple fronts. Their hunters were being hunted on Earth, their ships were being destroyed in space, and now their conquered worlds were rising up against them. But it was Ambassador who delivered the most devastating blow. Was not a soldier. She was 50 years old, thin and elegant, with silver hair and a mind sharp enough to cut steel. Before the invasion, she had been a diplomat, spending her life studying how to talk to people, how to understand them, how to find the weak points in their thinking. And now she used those skills as a weapon. Had spent 3 years learning everything about society. She learned their language, their history, their customs. She discovered that they were not a unified empire at all. They were a collection of hunting clans, each proud and independent, bound together only by their shared dominance over the galaxy. The clans competed with each other constantly. They argued about hunting rights, territory, honor. They had been held together by success, but now that success was turning to failure. Began broadcasting messages into space. She spoke their language perfectly, with an accent that made it sound like she was mocking them. Clan Thornback has lost 40 hunters to a single human squad, she announced. 40 of their best killed by creatures they call prey. How shameful, how weak. She waited a few days, then broadcast again. The clan fled from a battle with human children. Children, the great hunters of running from little ones, their ancestors must be howling with shame. The broadcasts continued day after day, knew exactly which clans hated each other, exactly which insults would hurt the most, exactly how to turn pride into anger and anger into violence. The clans began fighting each other. Each blamed the others for the failures against humanity. Old grudges flared into new conflicts. Fleets that should have been crushing human resistance were instead shooting at other ships. The Emperor tried to restore order, but his authority was weakening. The clans had followed him because he led them to victory. Now he was leading them to defeat. While they tore themselves apart, Admiral Menu worked on something that had never existed before, a galactic alliance. The species that had terrorized for thousands of years had never worked together. They were too different, too scattered, too afraid, but humans had given them something new. They had given them proof that resistance was possible. Menu sent ambassadors to every conquered species they could reach. They sent engineers to help improve human ships. They shared ancient star maps showing hidden routes through territory. The Hollow Folk provided spies that could move unseen through the darkest places. Each species had something to offer. Each species had a reason to fight. An elder came to meet on her flagship. The creature was beautiful, a being of pure light in roughly human shape. It flickered and glowed as it spoke. For 10,000 years we believed they were invincible, the elder said. We accepted our fate, we stopped hopping. Then you came, small, soft creatures from a tiny world, and you refused to accept anything. The elder's light grew brighter. You taught us that acceptance was a choice. You taught us that we could choose to fight instead. This is a gift beyond measure. Shook her head. We did not teach you anything. We just did what we had to do to survive. Yes, the elder agreed, and that is exactly what you taught us. Survival is not passive. Survival is a choice you make with every breath, every action, every moment. We had forgotten this. You helped us remember. The alliance grew stronger with each passing month. Human tactics spread to other species. Losses mounted. The empire that had ruled for 10,000 years began to crack. A captured commander was brought before for questioning. He was wounded and beaten, but his eyes still held contempt. "What are you?" he demanded. "We have conquered 1,000 species. None of them fought like you. None of them refused to surrender. None of them held on when all hope was lost." Looked at him for a long moment. She thought about the 3,000 colonists she had lost. She thought about the millions dead on Earth. She thought about 3 years of fighting, hiding, surviving. "We are what happens when you hurt something that remembers," she said finally. "Other species might forget, they might move on, they might accept defeat. But humans, we remember. We remember every wrong, every insult, every death, and we wait patiently for the chance to pay it back." She leaned closer to the captured commander. "You started a hunt, but you also created an enemy. And we will never, ever stop coming for you. Not until the hunt is over. Not until we have won. Not until every species you enslaved is free and every crime you committed is paid for." The commander looked into her eyes and saw something that chilled his 3 hearts. He had hunted thousands of prey animals across dozens of worlds. He knew what fear looked like. But he had never seen anything like what he saw in his eyes. It was not fear, it was not anger, it was something colder and more patient and infinitely more terrifying. It was certainty. She believed with absolute conviction that she would win, and that belief was not hope or faith, it was simple fact. She would win because she would never stop trying. She would win because giving up was not something humans knew how to do. "You should have killed us all in the first week," the commander whispered. "You should have destroyed Earth completely. Now it is too late. You have made enemies that will never stop." "Yes," agreed, "you should have, but you wanted to hunt us instead. You wanted sport, you wanted fun." She stood up and walked to the door. "I hope it was worth it." The war continued, the alliance grew, and somewhere in the vast darkness of space, plans were being made for the final battle. The hunt was almost over, but not the way they had expected. The assault on the began exactly 5 years after the first day of the Great Hunt. This was a deliberate choice. Humans, that had learned too late, were creatures of symbolism and spite. The Fleet Admiral stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Remembrance. The great ship had been built from the hulls of destroyed colony transports, including pieces of her old ship, the Horizon's Edge. 3,000 colonists had died on that ship. Now their broken vessel would help end the war. Around the Remembrance, a fleet stretched across the stars. Human warships flew alongside destroyers and carriers. Hollow folk shadow ships drifted at the edges, nearly invisible. Ships from a dozen other species filled the formation, each one carrying beings who had spent thousands of years as prey. Today they were all hunters. "Fleet status?" asked. "All ships report ready," her communications officer replied. "The Alliance is with us." Nodded, she looked at the main screen where the hung like a dark jewel against the stars. It was a harsh world, covered in black rock and red deserts. the perfect home for a species of hunters. "Begin the attack," she ordered. The battle that followed would be remembered for centuries. They had gathered every ship they could. Their fleet was still massive, even after years of losses. Thousands of warships defended there, crewed by hunters who would rather die than surrender. But the Alliance had something they did not understand. They had learned to work together. Human tactical genius combined with engineering skill and ancient knowledge. Each species covered the weaknesses of the others. Each species made the whole fleet stronger. The first wave hit the defensive lines like a hammer. Human ships led the charge, absorbing damage that would have destroyed less determined crews. Behind them, ships slipped through the gaps, targeting communication systems. They tried to regroup, but their formations were confused. Years of civil conflict between clans had broken their unity. Some ships refused to help others. Old hatreds flared even in the middle of battle. Admiral Menu coordinated the attack from a command ship behind the main fleet. He was old now, his hair completely white, but his mind was still sharp. "Push through Sector 7, he ordered. "The Thornback clan ships are not supporting the forces. Hit the gap between them." The Alliance fleet poured through the weakness like water through a crack in a dam. Ships exploded. Hunters died. The defenders were pushed back toward there. The battle lasted 3 days. On the ground, Commander led the invasion force. Her ghost corps had grown from a few hundred survivors to an army of 50,000. They had been training for this moment for years. That was harsh and unfamiliar, but had studied every map, every report, every piece of intelligence. She knew the terrain better than some did. The fighting was brutal. They were defending their home now, their families, their entire civilization. They fought with desperate courage, giving ground only when forced, dying rather than retreating. But humans had learned to match that courage with cunning. Every defensive position was outflanked, surrounded, destroyed. Every trap was detected and avoided. Every ambush was turned against the ambushers. General led his armored forces against the capital city. The city was built into a mountain, with walls 100 feet thick and weapons that could destroy ships in orbit. "We cannot take this place by force," one of his officers said. "The walls are too strong." Smiled. It was the same cold smile he had worn since losing his family. "Then we do not take it by force," he replied. Instead of attacking the walls, forces dug. They tunneled under the city, just as had tunneled under that forest 5 years ago. They watched the surface, waiting for an attack that never came. The attack came from below. Explosions ripped through the foundations of the city. Walls cracked and crumbled. Human soldiers poured up from underground, appearing in places they had thought were safe. The defenders were overwhelmed. By the end of the 3rd day, the emperor was trapped in his palace, with only his personal guard remaining. Doctor walked into the throne room. She was unarmed, but she was flanked by human soldiers carrying enough weapons to destroy anything that moved. She was older now, with gray in her black hair and lines on her face, but her eyes were bright and clear. The emperor sat on his throne of bones, staring at her with hatred. He was massive, even for with 4 arms thick as tree trunks and scars from 100 battles. "So the prey comes to gloat," he growled. Shook her head. I did not come to gloat, I came to explain. Explain what? Why you lost, stepped closer, showing no fear. You built your empire on one truth, the strong hunt the weak. You believed this was the natural order. You believed strength was the only thing that mattered. She paused, looking around the throne room at the trophies on the walls. Skulls and skins from species that had hunted to extinction. But you missed something, continued. You measured strength the wrong way. You thought strength meant claws and fangs and speed. You never understood that true strength is something else. And what is that? The Emperor asked, his voice dripping with contempt. Connection, said simply. Humans are not strong because we are the biggest or the fastest. We are strong because we work together, we sacrifice for each other, we remember our dead and fight for our living, we make friends with strangers and turn enemies into allies. She gestured at the soldiers behind her. Look at the army that defeated you. Humans, hollow folk, a dozen species working as one. You never imagined this was possible because you never tried it. You only knew how to take, to hunt, to dominate. You never learned how to give, to help, to build. The Emperor's claws dug into the arms of his throne, cracking the ancient bone. And there is one more thing, added. When something hurts us, we do not forget, we do not surrender, we do not accept. We find a way to hurt it back, even if it takes years, even if it takes generations. You started hunting us 5 years ago. You thought it would be easy sport. She leaned closer to the Emperor. You were teaching us where to aim. The Emperor looked into her eyes and finally understood what the captured commander had seen years ago. These creatures did not just want to win. They needed to win. It was built into their very nature. They were survivors, fighters, never surrendering spirits wrapped in soft skin and fragile bodies. What will you do with us? He asked quietly. Considered the question. She thought about the millions of humans who had died. She thought about the thousands of species that had destroyed. She thought about all the pain and loss and horror. We could destroy you, she said. We have the power now. Every species in the Alliance would support it. You have committed crimes beyond counting. The Emperor waited for death. But we will not, continued, because if we did, we would become like you. We would become hunters who destroy the weak, and that is not who humans are. That is not who any of us want to be. Well, she stood back. Your empire is over, your fleets are destroyed, your hunting grounds are liberated, but your species will survive. Your children will grow up in a galaxy where hunting is not the only way. Perhaps in time they will learn something different. The Emperor was led away in chains. He would stand trial before a galactic tribunal, the first of its kind, created because humans had demanded it. Justice, not just revenge. Years later, when new species were discovered on the edges of the galaxy, they would ask the older races the same question. Which species should we fear? The answer was always the same. They were hunters, they are clever, they are ancient, but if you want to survive in this galaxy, remember one rule above all others. Pause. Never hunt humans. Stood on the observation deck of the Remembrance, watching Earth turn slowly below. The war was over. The great hunt had ended, and humanity had not just survived. It had changed the galaxy forever. Beside her stood, and the survivors who had started with nothing and ended an empire. Do you think they will remember, asked, what we went through, what we had to become? Watched a diplomatic shuttle dock at a human station. Former hunters and former prey learning to live together in peace. They will remember, she said. That is the thing about humans, we always remember. She turned back to the stars, to a galaxy that had learned a lesson written in fire and blood. Humanity was not the biggest, not the fastest, not the strongest. But they were the species that never stopped fighting, never stopped hopping, never stopped trying. And that made them the most dangerous thing in the universe. The hunt was over. The humans had won.